Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm with The Scholar. We're delighted you're here with us this evening, and we hope you're here to have fun and celebrate the official book launch for Holly Wendt. Let's give her a round of applause. Before we begin, as always, I have some quick housekeeping notes. One, we are winding down our event series in 2023, but we already have dozens of events scheduled for 2024 that we haven't yet announced. Stay tuned to our social media pages, website, and e-newsletter for updates and announcements on upcoming author events. One of our last programs of the year is this Saturday with New York Times bestselling author Stephanie Land, so we hope you'll be able to come back for that event this Saturday. Lastly, we encourage you to come away with a signed copy of Heading North this evening. Holly will be sticking around after the talk for a book signing, and in addition, we will have wine and cake. A quick reminder that book sales are the bedrock of sustainability for our free author events, and every purchase helps support the bookstore, our staff, the author, and the future of our programming. Books are available for purchase up at the cafe. Now it's my honor to introduce our speakers this evening. Our interviewer this evening is Curtis Smith. Curtis has published over 100 stories and essays. His work has been cited by or included in the Best American Short Stories, the Best American Mystery Stories, the Best American Spiritual Writing, the Best Small Fictions, and in the Norton Anthology, New Microfictions. His 3 full-length story collections, The Species Crown, Bad Monkey, and Beasts and Men, have all been published by Press 53. He is also the author of 2 chapbooks of flash fiction, 2 essay collections, 4 novels, and a book of creative nonfiction. And I should mention that Curtis's brand new book is also available for purchase up at the cafe this evening. Of course, our featured author this evening is Holly M. Wendt. Holly is the author of Heading North. They are a recipient of the Robert and Charlotte Barron Fellowship for Creative and Performing Artists from the American Antiquarian Society, and fellowships from the Gentle Foundation and Hambidge Center. Their work has appeared in Passages North, Shenandoah, Barrel House, Memorious, and elsewhere. Holly is a former Baseball Prospectus contributor and contributing editor for The Classical. Their nonfiction has appeared in Bodies Built for Game, The Prairie Schooner, Anthology of Contemporary Sports Writing, The Rumpus, and Sport Literate. Holly is Associate Professor of English and Creative Writing at Lebanon Valley College. Of course, their new novel that we are here for this evening is titled Heading North. I've got to read just one blurb. This one's from Diane Zinna, who writes, quote, "Ted Lasso fans will devour the story of identity, forgiveness, and unexpected joy. With prose like a cold pack held tenderly against a bloodied brow, and with a precision of language that slices like the edge of a skate, Heading North is at once an enduring love story and some of the best sports writing and grief writing of our time." What a great blurb. This is awesome. We're very honored to host the book launch for Holly. So without further ado, please join me in giving Holly and Curtis a warm Harrisburg welcome.
Yeah, I will say, if you can get Diane Zinna to write you a blurb, do that, like for whatever it is that you do. She's amazing. Hi, it's so wonderful to see so many of you here and to be launching Heading North in this hallowed space of the Midtown Scholar. And as advertised, I will start with a little bit of reading. The first section I'm going to read is the novel's opening pages. 1. A lone firework flares red over Parov's downtown glow, while Viktor Myrnikov and Nikolai tighten the laces of their hockey skates on the snowy canal bank and step onto the narrow ice, sticks in hand. The New Year celebration means 4 days without games, 2 days when the Parov Iron Tigers won't even practice, but here, now, they find ice. Each stride slices the quiet, a sound like silver, a sound like the fog pluming their mouths as they cross and recross their little rink. Viktor breathes in the cloud of Nikolai's wake, then curls the puck away to circle one of the sneakers and snowbank goals. The clear, hard tap of Nikolai's stick on the ice, to me, shudders through Viktor's skate blades and up, coiling in his hands. The puck leaps toward the sound. Nikolai charges and their game begins in earnest. Here is Viktor's goal to defend, there his to attack. Nikolai calls the game shinny, a word stolen from his father, who picked it up from a career played with Canadians all over the NHL. Whatever they call it, hockey is hockey. They will argue about whether the puck has crossed the invisible line or slipped wide. No arbitrator but the moonlight reflected by snow and whoever is more stubborn. That, too, is part of the joy. Nikolai skates a little farther and the ice hums, a thin crack somewhere between them, an easing settle. The canal's meter of water is the least of their danger. While Nikolai passes to himself, canal bank to skate blade, remnants of cheering arrive on the air, likely the end of the ice carving contest, and under it, Viktor listens to Nikolai's building speed. Nikolai skates right into him, his shoulder to Viktor's chest, a shove and a promise as they scrabble, stick and stick. Nikolai leans, bites the earlobe under Viktor's knit hat, and kicks the puck between Viktor's feet. He takes 2 swift strides and snaps his wrist. A spray of snow flies up from the goal bank. Viktor whistles the interference as Nikolai laughs over the pop and glitter of another firework, then, too, the slurring noise of song in the distance. This is what they've skipped. The too easy, too careless affection of being drunk, the raucous claustrophobia of the city's celebration. Viktor shakes off a chill and bends into their imaginary face-off circle and tries to think of hockey, only hockey, but there is Nikolai across from him, level with his eyes. Nikolai wins the draw, and when he feints left a third time, Viktor pulls the puck to his own stick blade. Draggy steams of snow ripple the canal ice, but the air is fast, dry and snapping, clean enough that Viktor can imagine the iron in his blood calling north and north toward the goal, always hockey's pole star. He flicks the puck over the line even as Nikolai's hip catches his. Nikolai spins away and back. Even if they play against each other tonight, success is always something to celebrate. He raises his hand to slap Viktor's. Viktor stretches up, lifts his hand full height, so Nikolai has to jump. An excuse to catch and be caught. Dick, Nikolai says, laughing. He rests the padded fist of his glove under Viktor's jaw, brushes an uppercut softly from chin to cheek. The NHL is going to love you. As soon as it knows you exist, lingers unspoken. Everyone knows who Nikolai is. He is Kirill Stepnov's son. Knowing Nikolai has been good for Viktor's career. The scouts who come to see him can't help but see Viktor, whose passes are so often the launch point of Nikolai's attack. The trouble is that it will end both their careers, Viktor is certain, if anyone discovers all the ways they know each other. The trouble is, with Nikolai, someone is always looking. Okay. And the next section that I'm going to read comes from later in the novel. And as you may or may not know, an early major incident in the novel is a plane crash that kills Viktor's entire former Russian team, including Nikolai. I'm sorry. This section takes place not long after that plane crash, as Viktor is starting his season with his new team, the San Francisco Pilots. This is a scene from training camp. You will hear lots of names. It's okay if you don't recognize most of them. It's not the same, he repeats as he makes the first of 3 laps of the ice, willing the dimensions to settle into his stride. Not the same, all this gray and storm green. He will not let it flicker into red and white. Not the same, Philippe Germain's meticulously striped stick blade and the firecracker bursts of French between him and Alexandre Faure, who skates the top line on Case's right side. Not the same, the faint oceanic breath of the air even this deep in the building. The laundry detergent, the coffee blend, the sponsors' names and logos ringing the boards. But still his vision tilts and shifts because Teddy's number 10 sits on shoulders the same width as Radya's. Bolu reaches with the same lazy grace for a puck out of reach as Karl Zukov. Someone, somewhere, is cracking a piece of gum, and Viktor turns his head to look for Mad Luca and clips Joey Bartolo, who says something sharp in his thick New Jersey accent, while Viktor tries to apologize around the confusing ache. At least no one wears Nikolai's 72, and no one's dared yet take Kirill's 27. Viktor swallows memory and is glad when Coach Walkinshaw raises his arm, hooks them all toward center ice. The world begins its narrowing, a dome settling over everything. The team separates into groups, and Viktor and McTavish wait beside Philippe Germain and Adam Baran, the Pilots' all-star defenseman, and Joey Bartolo. The rest of the defensive corps, Eric Falk, Will Chernick, and 2 young hopefuls from Ithaca are on the other side of the ice. Viktor tries to think like Kirill would think. Their names don't matter. Until the roster is set, everyone here is competition, and even then, he has to be better than someone if he wants to play. If he doesn't want to sit with the other reserves in the press box while everyone else takes the ice. His teeth grind into his mouthguard's rubbery trench. He hardens his watch on the blue line and all these shifting pools of color. He cannot be the one stuck watching games in a suit. Not now. Coach Nolan sets out cones. Viktor's hands tighten on his stick. Most of the practice drills are the same everywhere, but not all. The pilots have a sharply choreographed passing drill that is precise, delicate, meant to remind everyone that hard hands cannot control the puck. It is a series of angles Viktor can draw in his sleep. The ice tilts and his vision fogs as the players take their places for Yevgeny Bodrov's trademark drill. This is not Frank Luton, the pilot's backup goalie. That is Mad Luca in the far side face-off circle. That is not Robbie Brown on the left wing, but Fletcher Norquay, and now the arena walls slam inward. Even the scent of the ice changes, and Viktor tries to breathe through the confines of his sleeve, his elbow pad tucked in against his mouth and nose as though he were covering a cough. He might cough. He might be choking. The mouthguard gags him, bile heaving sour on his tongue until he forces it down, forces everything down. This is why he stepped off that plane, to come here, do this. 3 forwards drift to their places. Nolan's whistle shrills. The drill, the cones, the obstacles, look. Philippe Germain seems to teleport through them, flickering behind the broad, blocky body of Dobroslav Vopat, third-line center, as the puck knifes to the always-ready curve of Adam Baran's stick. Francie darts in to disrupt, but the puck is already gone, kissed and cradled and saucered back 15 meters on, exactly where Germain is now waiting for it. Deke and deke around Dauber and a cone, then slingshot wrist flick, and the puck rattles home, not into the net, but a 5-gallon bucket turned on its side and anchored by 2 more cones. If the puck bounces out or the bucket careens away from its flimsy moorings, no good. Control the force of everything. Any stupid bull can break something, Coach Bodrov says, as though he's standing behind Viktor. The air thins. Coach Nolan is beckoning him, face kind. He knows Viktor knows this one inside and out. He was so good at this in July. So Viktor pushes off, feeds the puck the way he should to Eric Falk, but Viktor is not there somehow for the clever little return that cuts between Fare's skates. Viktor is in Svetlotarsk, waiting for Raj's half-breath of hesitation. Viktor is looking over his shoulder when the puck bounces into the boards. When he takes the puck toward the bucket, it skids to a stop a meter away. McTavish and Will Chernick run the drill imperfectly too. Chernick overcompensating, sending the bucket tumbling, but his shot didn't miss. Acid bubbles beneath Viktor's tongue. Again, the whistle calls. Again. Reset once more from here.
Thank you, Holly. How do you feel? This is something you look forward to for a long time?
It feels amazing, and when Curtis says a long time, he's not joking. I started this book in 2012. So, this book could be in 5th grade. And it feels really amazing to see it, and I'm just so pleased with the way it looks. Braddock did a beautiful job in making a beautiful book. Cover by Savannah Adams. Love it to death.
Once a book is out, and I'm sure like you spent a long time editing it, right? And now it's here in person. When you're not writing it day to day, do you feel a different relationship to it? Does it feel like this thing is like in its sealed room, or does it feel still alive?
I was worried that I would feel very distant from it because the amount of time that passed between me submitting it to Braddock included the start of the pandemic and sort of the like black hole that appeared around kind of all of our lives and all of our to-do lists. And so when Braddock came back and said, we would like to publish this, I went back and looked at it terrified that it wouldn't feel like my own, that I wouldn't even like it anymore because actual years had passed. And then I was so delighted to feel that I still love this story, I still love these characters, and holding it in my hands has, you know, absolutely rekindled the love for it as well. It's just so exciting.
So in those 11 years, as a writer, like on the technical side of things, how have you changed? Has your process changed? Has your aesthetic changed at all?
I wish desperately that my process had changed. My process is the world's least efficient one, in which I have no idea if a thing is going to work until I've actually written it. I can't outline. If I outline, I will immediately change what the outline is, or something will happen in the book and like the outline doesn't work anymore, so scrap that. Or I already know what happens if it's in an outline, and therefore I feel no urgency toward writing it. I write to discover things. If I know what's going to happen, I don't care anymore, at least to get the first draft out. And so the process of writing it was really laborious. The first draft was over 600 pages, y'all. This is not a 600-page book, you'll notice. And so the revision process contained throwing away fully half of the book, at least twice, because what I decided was the other half of the book, the second narration, didn't work a couple of times before I settled on the second narrator, Lilia Aliev, who is the general manager for the San Francisco Pilots. She was not originally a point of view character, and so it took me a really long time to figure out what that other point of view, the counterpoint to Viktor, was going to be. And again, the only way I have ever gotten to anything is by trying it out, saying that doesn't work, and starting over. To belabor somebody else's much better metaphor, I have to first write my own marble block, you know, and then carve away till I find the thing that exists inside of it. The good news is for writers, I don't have to pay for marble. It's just my own time, so that's fine. And you can revise and you can reshape it, but mostly I just have to write a new block and then get to carving. And unfortunately, that process remains my process, and it's kind of terrible.
So I was going to ask you about that. This next one, you're working on a novel currently.
Yes.
That's not going to take 11 years.
I hope not.
All right.
But
were there any like day-to-day tricks or organizational things that, you know, the first novel is often such a learning process. Was there anything you'll take to this, or is it a completely clean slate?
I will also say, because I have many students here, this is not the first novel I have attempted. I have my dissertation, which was a novel, that's in a drawer, probably never to be touched again. I had something else that I have 80% done in a drawer, probably never touching it again. This is the one that really stuck, that made me keep working on it for a decade and change. And I will say also, because it took so long, I did write several drafts of a whole other novel that's resting while it waits for me to figure out what's going on with the point of view. And then this new project that I'm working on, which I'm still very much in the thick of and looking at on a regular basis, is ongoing. And I don't really have any exciting tips or tricks for that, except that it really helps me to touch the thing every day, to be connected to it. There's that great Annie Dillard quote about works in progress going feral, and then you have to approach them like a lion tamer with a chair and a whip. So if you stay in contact with your work, it remains a little less feral. And so that's mostly been my process, is just stay with it, stay near it, even though that doesn't streamline the process in any way. It just keeps the desire going.
So I think when two people who write talk, it gets kind of crafty and nerdy, I think. But I think it's always interesting to talk about those process things. So in those 11 years, was there any time like you fell out of love with this project?
I didn't fall out of love with the project. There were years where I had no idea how to make it a better book. And I think the thing that changed most about me in those 10 years is I just got much better at writing sentences, y'all. And so my last set of edits was just sentence level things. The plot did not change, the events did not change, but I rewrote almost every sentence in the book to make them better sentences, and then the book as a whole became much better. So that's sort of the big piece. And yeah, I think I've lost the thread on part of the question there, Curtis.
So as you're writing, do you have like, oh, I worked on this for like 8 months, and I am tired of it. Do you put it away and then juggle with other projects?
When it's resting, that's when I tend to pick up something else. I try to get through a draft and then stick it in a drawer, because for me to edit effectively, I have to kind of forget that it's mine. And so the only thing that works for that is a bit of time. I'm also a big fan of changing the way it looks. So at some point in the editing process, I will export it to my Kindle so it looks like it's completely somebody else's work. I'll print it out in fonts that I hate, because then you feel really unkind about it, and like you don't excuse anything because you're like, ugh, Courier New, gross. Because if you can still love it in Courier New, you must love it. But you can love anything in Garamond, like, you know. So that process of having something else in rotation helps. I do also try to keep the iron a little hot by working on some short fiction in those pieces, sometimes essays. I had the good fortune of being able to write for the Plowshares blog and do a bunch of reviews and sort of critical essays for them, and I thought that was kind of a welcome. At least once a month, I had to stop what I was doing on the novel and then write about somebody else's work, and that was also really helpful.
So I'm interested in the revision process, because you talked about sentence by sentence, and I think this book really glows on the sentence level. So where does that come in? I mean, is that like I want to get story down and then I come back later and I'm looking at the sentence level sort of things, or is this all one big action as you go forward?
I think at all times I am trying to do my best at the sentence level, because a lot of what will happen follows directly from the sentence. If the sentence itself isn't right, the thing that happens next is probably not right, which is also why the process is so inefficient. Because I will write a bunch of less than good sentences, and they lead in less than interesting directions, and so the whole process feeds off of itself in that way. Although I will say for the last edit of this, I was happy with the plot. It was just the sentence level pieces, and maybe that's the mark of being finished, where when I am editing, I'm not changing scenes, I'm not really changing character actions, I'm just changing the language in which they do them, and I'm satisfied with everything else. So that might be the only way I know when I'm done, when I stop wanting something else to happen in the scene.
So I'll hit you up with one more process question. You know, writing a book involves many different activities, you know. So which one is your favorite and which one is your least favorite?
My favorite is definitely the first draft process. I love the heady rush of falling in love with a project, and I'm not beholden to anything that has happened before, and I know this isn't going to be the end, so there's no pressure. You can just sort of dig in and enjoy and discover all the characters. I love meeting new characters, and they just kind of show up when I need them, so that's pretty great. And I think my least favorite part of the process, which is not actually part of the writing process, is everything that goes into writing a query letter and writing a synopsis, because those things are so hard and so not at all like writing fiction.
I agree. Those are the two hardest things to write. So we talked briefly about the inciting incident here is a real life thing that happened, this plane crash. So did that hook you from the beginning, or did you need a couple of months or years to just let this kick around and imagine, you know, what story would evolve from it?
So the plane crash happened in September of 2011. The team jet carrying the Lokomotiv Yaroslavl ice hockey team, which plays in Russia's version of the NHL, the highest Russian league, crashed shortly after takeoff, and 2 people survived the initial crash. One died later in hospital, and it's just one of the, I think he was the plane's flight mechanic, was the only one who actually survived the crash. And when it happened, kind of it hit the internet like wildfire, because it was 2011, kind of the heyday of sports media. Hockey Twitter was alive and well, and there were all of these blogs, and I think there was more journalistic staff covering every aspect of sports kind of at that moment in the 20-teens and the late 2000s than there ever was before and ever will be again. And so there was just so much coverage of it. And I was, at that point, already watching hockey pretty obsessively. And I'm a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And one of my favorite players, Evgeny Malkin, is a Russian player, and the NHL is full of Russian players. And of course, there's this great outpouring of support for the families of the players affected, and also all these really necessary but really cold discussions about what do we do with a team where there are no more players for that team, but there is a spot for that team, and this team is a business, and we have to play hockey next year, don't we? Because so many other things rely on that. So it really did not take me long. I think I started writing this book within months of that.
So what was the, I mean, I did an interview with Bobby M. Mason, and she, one of her responses that surprised me was she fights writing a novel. She puts it off until I can't ignore it anymore. So was there something for you that, oh, this has reached some sort of critical mass, I have to do it? Or was it just, I keep thinking about it, and you started imagining scenarios?
The scenarios, the characters really, for me, kind of arrive fully formed. There was a version of one of the chapters in the book that bears no actual resemblance to the chapters that exist now, that was tried to be a short story for a little while, and that quickly did not work. I think I did pretend like it could be a short story for a hot minute, and that was just never going to fit all the things that I wanted for the work. But I don't actually even remember the moment where I was like, I have to start writing. I just remember that 2012 to 2013 is easily the most productive writing period of my life. I would just sit down and stay at my computer for hours, and it was joyful, despite the fact that it's a sad book in many ways also. But I just had such a great time in this world, and it was just all generative energy kind of pouring out. But I don't know what was the actual catalyst to saying I have to write this thing. But that's also because I don't resist writing a novel at all, which is terrible, y'all. Resist writing novels because they take a really long time. Make sure you're committed. I'm just like, yes, this is a great idea. Start a new novel, do it. Which, again, because I don't plan anything, it always seems like a good idea.
And we're in this hockey world, right? And I think hockey is one of the most aesthetically pleasing sports, and there are some great passages in here that I felt like I was on the ice, but you're also a baseball person, so why hockey? Was it just the plane crash, or was it like, why not baseball?
I think there are too many beautiful baseball novels already. And I do have a secret little baseball novel idea in me, and maybe that will happen someday. But one of the things that also drew me to this and probably helped me keep going on this is that there's essentially a vacuum for this kind of book in ice hockey. There have been a handful of really lovely ice hockey novels. The one that I keep going back to is Richard Wagamese's Indian Horse, which is not only about ice hockey, but also about the horrors of residential schools in Canada, and racism, and essentially lots of other isms that are impacting one's ability to be who one is while playing a sport. Of course, there's the Frederick Backman novels, the Beartown series, which is now a TV series, which is cool. And that, interestingly, the first Beartown novel hadn't come out when I started querying this book. And then when I started querying it a second time, older, wiser, with a better query, the second book had just come out, so it was a weird time. And then I think of Lynn Cody's novel, The Antagonist, which uses hockey but isn't exactly a hockey novel, and essentially the number of ice hockey books that I can think of that are treating the sport in a literary way is relatively few. Whereas in baseball, like, everywhere you turn, there's a beautiful literary baseball novel kind of coming out. Emily Nemens is The Cactus League, Chad Harbaugh is The Art of Fielding, and then kind of on backward through the canon. So I thought there was a space for this as well.
You said you don't plan at all. And other people, like John Irving says, I need to know that last sentence, not just the vibe, but the actual words. Mm-hmm. So, and when I teach writing as well, and I also always say we're all so different. But if you don't have like an ending, like do you have maybe not a scene, but maybe a tone or mood that you want it to end on?
I mean, maybe it's a little disingenuous to say I don't know anything. I know that I am inherently an optimist, and so kind of everything I write is going to end in hope one way or another. And there's definitely a mood. Sometimes I will have inklings of this is what the final scene is going to be, and then it gets me to where I need to be in order to figure out what the actual final scene is going to be, which is usually how it works. I think it's going to be one thing, I get there, and I'm like, it's not quite right. And then you stare at it for a while, and then it teaches you what you need to get to the real ending.
We talked about access points. Like, how do you as a writer, what's your main go-to? Like, some people it's a situation, some people, like Flannery O'Connor, was like tone and mood. Emma Klein says, I often enter through setting, locale. That's how I get into these worlds. For your writing, in this book and your other work, did you have a main access point, or do you play around with them at all?
For me, it's always character. Sort of, it sounds kooky to say, but a person shows up in my head, kind of fully formed, and then I'm just following them around with my notebook and sort of watching what they're doing, listening for what that voice is. And pretty much all of the major players in this novel showed up very early, very clearly. The nature of the characters almost never changes. So that's usually the strongest point for me. And occasionally I will have an inkling of an image or a sound or a tiny bit of setting that I know has to appear somewhere. I was telling Tack earlier that I was in San Francisco once, years ago, with a friend, being a tourist, and we were at the Golden Gate Bridge, and we were standing there, and I heard a sound. And it was just the wind coming under the bridge and sort of making this beautiful vibration against the metal, and I was like, I need that. And maybe that's why this fictional hockey team is actually located in San Francisco, in addition to all of the cultural reasons that San Francisco is a good setting for this. And there wasn't already a professional hockey team there, which was important also.
I read your interview in JMWW. You like all things woven.
I do.
So I can see that in this book, right? We have all these different layers. We have the physical nature, we have the sport, we have emotional layers. So as you're writing, like, when might you realize, like, I'm in the middle of Act 2? Let's say we're using a 3-act thing. I'm in the middle of Act 2. Oh, this thing's coming up. When you're drafting, do you just keep going, or do you go back and refit to these layers as you go?
Mostly I try to get to the end of a draft and then go back and sort of figure out what needs to be altered, retrofitted, revised in order to make that last thing that I think is most worthwhile still work. But I will at some point in the process have a draft that contains lots of mismatched continuities or changes in dynamics. But in this book too, a lot of it felt, as you described, layers, felt inextricable. There was no way for me to separate the idea of Viktor as a player and sort of the longing to be good at what he does and to find that sort of athletic dream that so many folks have, but also a longing to be himself, a longing to like honor the memory of the dead. Like none of that could be separated out for me. Similarly with Lilia, like every single thing she does is underpinned with the need to prove herself, to be, because she's the first woman GM in the NHL. We haven't gotten there yet in the real NHL, so chop chop. And so everything she does is dedicated to that, which means not asking for help, which means not admitting when things aren't going well, which means having to bear up under all of this grief because she's also lost her stepson in this crash. And they have a lot in common, and it's all the things that they can't actually admit to each other that they have in common, because to do so would be too vulnerable. And so in this, I think it was all very organic because none of it could be separated.
But then you go back and say, oh, here's a thread I need to weave.
Mm-hmm.
So in the revision process, like Margaret Atwood describes hers as kind of like a World War I rolling barrage. Like, here I am out in front with my first draft, but behind the scenes, I'm editing as I go. So maybe like morning write, evening edit. Do you do those simultaneously, or is it just like, I'm going to do it all and then revise it all?
I try my best to get through the draft and then revise it, essentially because my process is a little whimsical. And so if I'm revising as I'm going, but then something changes radically later on, then I will have done all that revision too many times for it to make sense. And also, like many writers in this room, I don't have the luxury of morning writing, evening editing. I have what can I get done in the 90 minutes before I have to get to my office in the morning. And so for me, that's best to make forward progress. And then when I have breaks, summer is good for this. That's when the major editing work comes out, because then I will go to paper, spread the whole thing out on the floor, and just get really, really in the weeds with it.
And we have 2 points of view in here, 2 narrators.
Yes.
What was that decision like? Because that's structurally, that's a big decision. Did you ever waver on that and think it belongs more to this person than to this person?
In conceiving this book, it was always Viktor's book, but the exceptionally large first draft contained the point of view of a character who doesn't even get named in this draft. So like radical revision, she exists as one sort of throwaway line you will miss if you didn't know to look for it. And I just knew that I needed another voice, because also the way I imagined the audience for this book was one that probably didn't want to live only inside the obsessive, grieving head of one character who frankly doesn't have great perspective on anything outside of his own life, because I was working really closely with a limited third, so we're really close to Viktor when we're close to Viktor, and it got a little claustrophobic. So I wanted to open that up. And also, were it not for Lilia's point of view, there would be 1.5 women in this book. And so I'm like, that doesn't seem great.
So just 2 more questions.
Sure.
What happened to the other 300 pages here? And did you need to write them to get here?
I did need to write them to get there, to figure out I figured out a lot of things I didn't want to say, because they didn't work and there was no plot in those 300 pages that aren't there. And it was a big decision. I will say that when I was querying agents, I had one very wonderful almost. I was on the phone with this person for an hour, but I got that piece of information that I needed to make that radical cut, to remove that narrative and then start writing Lilia's. And so it took a lot. I sort of stubbornly persisted with that for longer than I should have, but it also taught me a lot of things about the book.
And for sure, I'm sure, I do the same. I'll leave something, and I needed that to get to wherever. Let's wrap up with, we talked about Stephen King earlier, his book on writing. He talks about the ideal reader. Do you kind of have that person in mind during the revision process or during any part of the process?
The way I think of an ideal reader, it's a combination of essentially a few people, one of whom was my undergraduate advisor, who is the most no-nonsense human being I have ever met in my whole entire life, and also then a friend who is also a poet and therefore the most exacting line editor I know, and one of my former roommates who is just an enthusiast of a well-told story. And so thinking about what could I write that would make all three of those people proud at the same time. Not necessarily that they would pick up that book. They all have very different reading tastes. But what could I do at the level of craft that they would say, yeah, that's doing the right kinds of things. That's usually what I'm aiming for. And you'll notice that that person, those people, are people who care for my work and who care for me. Friends, don't imagine an antagonistic reader as your ideal reader. You will not please them. Don't try. Think of your ideal reader as someone who wants you to succeed, and then do your best to sort of live up to whatever that high bar might be.
Okay, well, thank you. We're getting the signal that cake is coming and wine, and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We do have time for maybe 10-ish minutes for audience Q&A. So if you have a question for Holly or Curtis, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll come around with the mic.
Hello. As a fellow person who has to put a draft away before revising can happen, I feel very seen. But my question was, when you're in your drafting process, when do you know you're ready for that second set of eyes to come in, when it's ready to be not just yours?
Oh, super great question. For me, it's when I look at my draft and don't think immediately, oh, I should fix that. I want to take my draft as far as I can take it myself, essentially before I spend one of those reader time tokens, because even the friends who love you best have a finite amount of time. So if I know I'm not happy with X, Y, or Z, I want to make sure I've done my best before I pass it on.
Other questions?
Congratulations. I loved your reading. Great questions, Curtis. So were you, when you were in the generative stages in 2011 or 2012 to 2013, you were saying how that it was like your best, most productive writing time, and I was like, yes, I know what that's like, and I'm not there right now, and it's the worst. Were you reading anybody at that time that was inspiring you or opening those doors, or do you have ways of getting into that, or that you historically have gotten into those spaces to write? And if the reading question doesn't connect to that, who are you reading right now, or who have you read during this process that's inspired you?
So I always try to be reading something. While I was writing this, I was reading as many sort of literary sports things as I could get my hands on. So that's when I read Indian Horse. That's when I read Lynn Cody's The Antagonist. And I was reading so much sports nonfiction. That was also the time of my life when I was a contributing editor for The Classical, and so I was helping other people develop pitches into essays and just like 24/7 kind of immersing myself in sports stuff, you know, watching one game on one screen, earbud in for a radio feed of something else. It was ridiculous. And so I was doing a lot of that, just sort of like atmosphere building. But the folks that I turn to when the writing is not going well, which, y'all, it happens, I always go back to Annie Dillard. Pilgrim at Tinker Creek and The Writing Life are just necessary texts for me. And then I try to find whatever books those are that you cannot put down. And it has nothing to do with sports, but Madeline Miller, Alexander Chee, Garth Greenwell, Andrew Sean Greer, who also does beautiful but funny books. They're great. And then, right now, mostly what I'm doing is reading student work, because it's November, but also just read Curtis's new book, which is amazing, The Lost and the Blind. It's so intense. And I'm super excited to get into Nicola Griffith's Hild, which is historical fiction and not at all related to this, but whatever is good storytelling, like really immersive. You just want to fall down that rabbit hole and never come out.
So I was reading an interview you did with Leptown, and I know that sexuality plays a big part in this novel as well. So in your opinion, why is a narrative like that important in this day and age?
Such a good question. To go the current events angle, within the last couple of weeks, the NHL has gone from allowing players to use something called pride tape. It's just rainbow tape that they use on their sticks during warm-up. Allowing them to use that, to banning it outright. And then when one player, Travis Dermott from the Arizona Coyotes, who is frankly nobody, like a really not well-known player, decided he was going to do it anyway, the NHL immediately rescinded their stance, so they clearly didn't care that much about their banning stance. So this is very much a conversation that is ongoing, and the NHL is the only major men's sport in which no former or current players have come out. The only one. So that says something about the NHL's culture. And we know statistically it's not that there aren't any gay ice hockey players. Mathematically, it doesn't work out that way. And also the players have expressed significant support for Pride Nights, and the NHL was one of the first leagues to have players come out in support of the You Can Play project, which was also started in 2012, and one of the important parts of this novel's process, which is an organization devoted to ending homophobia in professional sports, and was started by one of the NHL's kind of dynastic families, the Burkes. And so it's just been a necessary part of the conversation, and because I hadn't read a book like that. Some of the, Chad Harbaugh's The Art of Fielding and Emily Nemmons' The Cactus League feature gay characters, but in a much more minor role. And I was like, why is that? So here we are.
Okay, I have like so many questions I could ask, but I'm gonna limit myself. We were talking about point of view characters and how, you know, like you went through a couple of different iterations in terms of like who's gonna be the point of view characters. And in my like reading of Heading North, there are so many characters that I like so badly want to know more about. And I know that's like the worst piece of writing advice you can give someone is like, I wanna know more about this. And so I was wondering like if you could, like, or if you gave us like a scene from a character who is not currently a point of view character, like who would it be? Does that make sense? If you could pick someone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the natural response here is Kirill, because he just like steals all the scenes he's in. He's just a humongous personality, and is the character who makes things happen in this book. If you feel stuck, have a character who is just willing to do whatever and make things happen. That's really helpful. But my personal favorite would be McTavish Norquay. I just want to hang out with him all the time. But that would be just self-indulgent and totally unnecessary to the book.
Any other questions?
Congratulations. So you mentioned that you've been writing this since 2012, and politically and socially, a lot has changed regarding queer rights, just progressive things in general, and has gone forward and has also gone a little bit backwards in some recent years. And I was wondering if that's something that has informed your process, and like if you welcomed it to inform your process, or if you tried to like shutter any of it out for the sake of moving forward in the novel.
The novel is a little bit protected by the fact that the book takes place mostly in 2011 and 2012. That's sort of the main season. So there's a lot of current events I didn't have to deal with, and a lot of things that I could just sort of sidestep. I will say I was thinking about a lot of that as I was writing, and also thinking about what are the kinds of books that you know, someone might want to read in order to see themselves reflected in a positive light, and to gain access to a world where there is some hope in it, even amid a lot of tragedy. So present in mind, but I was also trying to, and also bound by the fact that this is mostly a book focused really tightly on ice hockey in that way that a lot of professional athletes are. It's like, this is your singular life. There isn't much beyond it, which is both by choice and also by virtue of the fact that if you're a professional athlete, you don't have a lot of the same problems that other folks do. And so these are also characters with immense privilege in terms of finances, in terms of race, in terms of gender and gender presentation. But there's also a lot of things that are holding them back. So it's a lot of juggling.
We have time for maybe one more question. Yes.
I'm curious if the title stayed the same from like 2012 and like the 600-page version, if it wavered at any point.
The title has stayed the same, and maybe even against my own wishes. Because if you do a little search, there are a lot of books with this title. And that's not a great thing. If do a little research, try to title your book something that isn't popular. But it just would not let go. That has been the title from the beginning, and I have tried other things, and they wouldn't stick. It didn't feel right. And I also love Mia Compass, and so that as metaphor feels really useful. And the San Francisco Pilots logo, like pilot whale, but also ship's pilot, there's a compass rose in the logo, and so it was just always this metaphor in the book that I couldn't let go of.
We do have to wrap up, but can we give Holly and Curtis one more round of applause? Holly, congratulations. We're so excited and honored to host you for your book launch. We have wine, we have cake, we have books available for purchase. Holly's going to stick around for a book signing right over here if you'd like to get your book signed. And I think that covers it. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for coming out.